Delete this email now, or I will delete you from this neighborhood. That's what our HOA president texted me at 12:14 in the morning, 3 hours after she'd rewritten the rules for 211 families without a single vote. I didn't delete anything. I screenshotted it, printed it, and 6 weeks later, that message became Exhibit A in the meeting that ended her reign over Maple Hollow Estates. My name is Danielle Reyes, and 8 months ago, I thought Maple Hollow Estates was the safest, most boring place I'd ever live. 211 homes, tree-lined cul-de-sacs, a community pool that closed at 9, and an HOA that mostly emailed us about leaf blower hours. I bought my house on Larkspur Court 3 years ago, a modest 3-bedroom with a wraparound porch I'd spent 2 summers restoring. My neighbors were the kind of people who waved from their driveways and brought over banana bread when you moved in. Frank next door had lived there since 1994. Priya across the street ran a home bakery out of her kitchen, something the HOA had quietly approved years earlier. It was, by every measure, an ordinary street. On Saturday mornings, half the street showed up to the pool with folding chairs and a cooler nobody remembered whose turn it was to bring. Kids rode bikes down the middle of Larkspur Court without anyone honking. It was the kind of ordinary I didn't know I'd been looking for until I finally had it. And it made what came next feel even more like a betrayal, because it wasn't some faceless corporation that turned our lives upside down. It was someone who lived 4 houses away. Then Vivian Cross became HOA president. She moved into the neighborhood 18 months before, took over the board after the previous president retired, and by month 3 she'd already earned a reputation. Vivian measured grass height with an actual ruler. She once left a violation notice on a mailbox because a garden gnome was, in her words, aesthetically inconsistent with the community vision. Most of us laughed it off. Annoying, sure, harmless, we assumed. We were wrong. On a Sunday night in March at 11:47 p.m. Every homeowner in Maple Hollow received the same email. The subject line read, "Important, updated community standards effective immediately." Attached was a 14-page document, new restrictions on paint colors, a ban on visible basketball hoops, a prohibition on home-based businesses including apparently Priya's bakery. And at the bottom, a new fine schedule up to $500 per violation per week. There had been no meeting, no vote, no notice. I read it twice before I understood what it actually meant. This wasn't a policy update. It was a complete rewrite of how we were allowed to live in our own houses, dropped on us in the middle of the night, with no explanation of who approved it or how. By Monday morning, my phone hadn't stopped buzzing. The neighborhood group chat, usually reserved for lost cats and recommendations for gutter cleaners, had 200 unread messages. Frank wanted to know if the new rules applied to his flagpole, which had been up since Clinton was president. Priya was in tears. Her bakery brought in $1,100 a month, money she needed since her husband's hours got cut at the plant. I did what I always do when something doesn't add up. I went looking for the paperwork, our CC and RS, the covenant's conditions. And restrictions, the legal document every homeowner signs when they buy into an HOA, were clear on one point. Any amendment to community rules required a vote of the board at a properly noticed meeting, with minutes recorded and distributed within 10 business days. I checked our HOA's own website. The last recorded board meeting was 5 months earlier in October. There was no meeting in March, no agenda, no minutes. So I emailed Vivian directly, CCing the 2 other board members I could find contact information for. My question was simple: when was this policy voted on and where are the minutes? Her reply came 4 hours later, 3 lines long. The board has full authority to update community standards for the safety and value of the neighborhood. Compliance is mandatory. Please direct further questions to the March newsletter. There was no March newsletter. Nobody had received one. I walked the block that Tuesday evening, knocking on doors just to see how many people had actually read the whole 14 pages. Nobody had. Most people had skimmed the first paragraph, seen the words "effective immediately," and assumed resistance was pointless. That's the part that scared me most, not the rules themselves, but how quickly 211 households were prepared to just comply with something none of us had agreed to. That Thursday, Priya got her first notice. A yellow paper zip tied to her mailbox. Violation of Section 9(4), unauthorized home commercial activity, 72 hours to cease operations or face a $500 fine doubling weekly. She'd been running that bakery openly with the HOA's written approval since 2021. I started asking around the neighborhood and a pattern emerged fast. Every single new restriction seemed to target someone specific. Frank's flagpole violated the new seasonal decor clause. The Whitakers' basketball hoop, which their 12-year-old used every day after school, violated the new visibility clause. My own porch furniture, a set I'd had for 2 years, apparently violated a new rule about uniform outdoor aesthetics. It didn't feel like community standards. It felt like a list of grievances Vivian had been keeping quietly for months, waiting for the moment she had enough control to weaponize it. I called the HOA's management company, a small firm 2 towns over that handled the books but had no authority over rulemaking. The woman on the phone, Carla, sounded uncomfortable the second I mentioned March. "We didn't process any amendment in March," she told me, lowering her voice like she didn't want to be overheard. "The last one we filed was from the previous board back in the fall." That's when it hit me. Vivian hadn't just skipped a step. She may have invented the rules herself, printed them on HOA letterhead, and mailed them to 211 families as though they were law. I asked Carla if she could send me anything, an old bylaws copy, a record of board membership, meeting logs, anything on file. She hesitated, then said she'd see what she could do, but that Vivian had recently requested all records be routed through her personally before release to homeowners. Someone was trying to control not just the rules, but the evidence of how they were made. I hung up the phone and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Because if Carla was right, this wasn't a bad HOA president overreaching. This was something that could genuinely hurt people, find them into foreclosure, shut down a family's income, all built on a policy that, as far as I could tell, never legally existed. I requested an emergency HOA meeting the following week, using the clause in our bylaws that allowed any homeowner with 15 or more signatures to force one. I got 34 signatures in 2 days. People were furious, and more than that, they were scared. Priya had already lost 2 of her regular bakery clients who didn't want to be associated with a violation. The Whitakers had taken down their son's basketball hoop rather than risk the fine. Vivian didn't respond to the meeting request for 6 days. When she finally did, it was to schedule it for a Tuesday at 9 a.m., a time when most of the working homeowners in the neighborhood, myself included, would be at our jobs. I couldn't get out of work that day. Neither could Frank, Priya, or 14 other people who'd signed the petition. It felt unmistakably deliberate. That same week, I got my own violation notice. Section 11, 2, unauthorized outdoor furniture. 72 hours to remove or a $200 fine. I stood on my porch holding that yellow slip, looking at furniture that had been sitting in the exact same spot for 2 years, through 2 prior HOA presidents without a single complaint. I texted Vivian calmly, asking for the specific rule citation and the date it was adopted. Her reply this time came almost instantly. "Compliance isn't optional, Danielle. I'd hate for this to escalate." I asked what that meant. Her response, "You have friends in this neighborhood who like living here peacefully. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." It didn't feel like a warning about porch furniture. It felt like something else entirely. That night, I couldn't sleep. I opened my laptop and started digging through my state's actual HOA statutes. Not our internal bylaws, but the state law that governs what HOAs can and cannot legally do, regardless of what's written in their own paperwork. And there it was, in plain language. Any amendment to recorded covenants or community rules requires an affirmative vote of the board at a meeting for which proper notice. A minimum of 72 hours in writing to all members has been provided. Rules adopted without that notice are void and unenforceable. Boards that impose fines under void rules can be held personally liable for the amounts collected. Personally liable, not the HOA, Vivian specifically. I cross-referenced the statute number 3 separate times because it seemed almost too clean, too perfectly in our favor. It wasn't. It was sitting right there in the state's public code database, cited in 2 prior court cases involving other HOAs in the state, both of which had ended with the board rescinding the rules and refunding every fine collected. I read that sentence 4 times. Then I called Priya. "I think Vivian broke the law making these rules," I told her. "Not just our bylaws, state law." There was a long pause on the line. Then Priya said the thing that changed everything. "I still have every email from when the board approved my bakery in 2021. Signed by 3 board members, I never deleted them." I asked her to send me everything she had. Then I posted in the neighborhood group chat, asking anyone with old board emails, meeting minutes, or approval letters to send them my way. Within 24 hours, I had 11 different homeowners sending me screenshots, old approvals, old meeting notices, a printed newsletter from 2 board presidents ago showing the actual legally adopted rules. I laid it all out on my kitchen table that Sunday night. The old rules, the new rules. The state statute, Vivian's texts. It was no longer a disagreement about a garden gnome or a basketball hoop. It was documentation, and it was enough to end this. At 12:14 the following morning, I got the text that would become the centerpiece of everything. Delete this email now, or I will delete you from this neighborhood. I hadn't sent an email. I'd only forwarded the state statute to the other two board members, asking politely if they'd known the new rules might be legally void. Vivian had panicked. And panic, I was about to learn, makes people say things they can't take back. I didn't respond to the text. I screenshotted it, dated it, and added it to the folder I'd started calling, only half-jokingly, the case. The rescheduled emergency meeting, the one Vivian had tried to bury on a Tuesday morning, got moved after 11 homeowners threatened to file a joint complaint with the state's HOA Ombudsman office if she didn't accommodate a reasonable time. She relented. Thursday, 7 p.m. The community clubhouse. I'd never seen that room full before. Every folding chair was taken. People stood along the back wall. Frank was there. Priya was there, holding a manila folder of her own. Even homeowners I'd never spoken to showed up, phones out, ready to record. Vivian sat at the front table between her two remaining board members, Harold and Denise, both of whom looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She opened the meeting by reading a prepared statement about necessary modernization and protecting property values. I let her finish. The clubhouse air conditioner rattled overhead, the only sound in a room that had gone from restless whispering to dead quiet the moment Vivian sat down. I could feel Priya's eyes on the back of my neck. My hands were steady. My voice, when it came, was not going to be. Then I stood up. I have a question about when the March policy update was voted on, I said. Could you point me to the meeting minutes? Vivian's jaw tightened. The board has discretion to. I'm not asking about discretion, I said. I'm asking for the minutes. Section 6(3) of our bylaws requires them within 10 business days of any vote. I've requested them 3 times in writing. I haven't received them. Silence. Then Harold, the board secretary, shifted uncomfortably and said quietly, there wasn't a meeting. The room went still. There wasn't a meeting, I repeated, so the March policy was never actually voted on. I have authority as president to, Vivian started. No, you don't, I said, and I laid the printed state statute on the table in front of her along with a highlighted section. State law is clear. Rule changes require a properly noticed board vote. Without one, they're void. Every fine issued under the March policy is void too. And under Section 4 of this statute, a board member who knowingly collects fines under an unenforceable rule can be held personally liable. I placed Priya's folder next to it, the 2021 approval emails, signed by 3 separate board members explicitly authorizing her bakery. This rule, I said, tapping the March document, contradicts a legally adopted approval that's still on file. You didn't modernize anything. You overrode an existing, valid agreement without a vote. Vivian's face had gone pale. Denise, the treasurer, was already flipping through her own copy of the bylaws like she was seeing them for the first time. Then I read the text out loud. Delete this email now, or I will delete you from this neighborhood. Sent at 12:14 a.m. in response to a homeowner forwarding a state statute to fellow board members. Someone in the back row gasped. Someone else laughed, sharp and disbelieving. That's not a threat, Vivian said quickly. That was taken out of context. There isn't a context where that sentence is appropriate, Frank said from the back, and the room murmured in agreement. Harold cleared his throat. I move that the March policy update be declared void, pending legal review, and that all fines issued under it be rescinded. Denise seconded it before he'd finished the sentence. Vivian looked around the room at 200 people, at her own board members turning away from her, at the statute sitting open on the table, and said nothing at all. The vote passed. 7 minutes later, 28 homeowners in the room signing a formal complaint to be filed with the state ombudsman that same night. Vivian resigned as HOA president 11 days later. She didn't announce it at a meeting. She sent an email, appropriately at a normal hour this time, citing personal reasons and thanking the community for the opportunity to serve. Nobody replied. The state ombudsman's office opened a formal review into the March policy and the fines issued under it. Every single fine, including Priya's, including mine, including Frank's for a flagpole that had survived 4 presidencies, was reversed within 3 weeks. Priya's bakery reopened without a single condition. The Whittaker's son had his basketball hoop back up before the weekend. Harold, the board secretary who'd finally told the truth in that meeting, was elected interim president in a special vote 2 weeks later. One of his first actions was implementing a rule requiring every board decision to be recorded, time-stamped, and posted publicly within 5 business days. He called it the Danielle Rule, which embarrassed me more than I expected, but I didn't ask him to take my name off it. I still live on Larkspur Court. My porch furniture is still exactly where it's always been. Nobody's measured my grass with a ruler in months. What stays with me isn't the fine or the meeting, or even that text message at 12:14 in the morning. It's how close 211 families came to accepting rules that were never legally theirs to follow, not because we were careless, but because most of us assumed that if something arrived on official letterhead with an authoritative tone and a fine attached, it must be legitimate. It took one homeowner asking to see the minutes to unravel all of it. I've learned that living in a community governed by an HOA doesn't mean surrendering your right to ask questions. Bylaws exist for a reason. State statutes exist for a reason. And the people who write themselves the most power are, more often than not, the ones most desperate for you to never check their paperwork. If you're in a similar fight right now, staring down a fine you're not sure is even legal, or a board that stopped answering your emails, start where I started. Ask for the minutes. Read your state's statute. Keep every text message. You might be surprised how quickly the loudest voice in the room goes quiet when someone finally asks to see the paperwork. If this story hit home, or reminded you of your own HOA horror story, you know exactly where the comment section is. I read every single one. And if you want more of these from ordinary people who found the receipts and won, you know what to do with that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next one.